The morning sun cast long shadows across the gardens of Adelaide Cottage as Catherine, Princess of Wales, stood at the kitchen window, watching her children play in the yard. George was teaching Charlotte how to properly kick a football, while little Louis chased after butterflies with his characteristic giggle that never failed to make her smile. These simple moments had become precious beyond measure, each one a treasure she stored carefully in her heart. William appeared behind her, his arms wrapping gently around her waist as he rested his chin on her shoulder. They stood in comfortable silence, both knowing that words could never capture the weight of what lay ahead. The diagnosis had changed everything. Yet in moments like these, surrounded by the laughter of their children and the warmth of their love, it felt as though time might stand still. The past 6 months had been a journey neither of them could have imagined. What began as persistent fatigue and unexplained symptoms had led to countless medical appointments, specialists, and, finally, the devastating news that would reshape their entire world. The rare neurological condition was progressive, and, while treatments could slow its advance, the doctors had been honest about the prognosis. Catherine had perhaps 2 years, maybe less, before the disease would claim her life. They had made the difficult decision to keep the diagnosis private initially, wanting to process the news as a family before the inevitable media storm that would follow. William had taken extended leave from his royal duties, citing family commitments, while Catherine gradually stepped back from her public engagements. The palace had crafted careful statements about her need for rest, but those closest to them knew the truth was far more serious. Dr. Harrison, Catherine's primary oncologist, had explained the condition with gentle precision during their last appointment. The disease would gradually affect her motor functions and cognitive abilities, though her personality and memories would remain intact until the very end. It was perhaps a small mercy in an otherwise devastating situation. She would be able to say goodbye to those she loved, to share her wisdom with her children, and to ensure that William understood her deepest wishes for their family's future. Catherine had surprised everyone, including herself, with her strength in facing the diagnosis. Perhaps it was her years of royal training that had prepared her for maintaining composure under pressure, or maybe it was simply the fierce protective instinct of a mother who knew she had limited time to prepare her children for a world without her. Whatever the source of her courage, she had approached each day with purpose and grace that left everyone around her in awe. The children knew something was different, though they hadn't been told the full truth yet. George, at 11, was old enough to sense the gravity in hushed conversations between his parents and the increased presence of medical equipment that had quietly appeared in their home. Charlotte, always perceptive beyond her years, had noticed her mother's occasional stumbles and the way certain activities that once came easily now required more effort. Louis, still young enough to live purely in the moment, continued his carefree existence, though he had become more clingy with his mother lately. William had struggled initially with anger and denial, raging against the unfairness of it all. Why Catherine? Why now, when their children still needed her so desperately? Why when they had finally found their rhythm as a family and were looking forward to growing old together? The palace had quietly arranged for grief counselors and therapists to help them navigate this impossible situation, and gradually William had moved from anger to a fierce determination to make every remaining moment count. They had begun making videos for the children, Catherine sharing stories about her childhood, family traditions, and the values she hoped they would carry forward. William would often find her in their private sitting room, speaking softly to the camera about everything from how to handle disappointment to the importance of kindness and service to others. She was creating a legacy of love and wisdom that would guide their children long after she was gone. The couple had also worked with palace advisors to plan for the transition of Catherine's royal duties and charitable patronages. She wanted to ensure that the causes closest to her heart would continue to receive support and attention. The children's mental health initiatives, her work with early childhood development, and her passion for photography would all need champions to carry them forward. Catherine spent hours crafting detailed notes about each organization, sharing the personal connections she had built and the vision she had for future projects. Friends and family had rallied around them with incredible support. Catherine's parents, Michael and Carol Middleton, had moved into a nearby cottage to be available whenever needed. Her siblings, Pippa and James, visited regularly, bringing normalcy and laughter that helped maintain some sense of ordinary family life. William's father, King Charles, had been deeply affected by the news, drawing on his own experiences with loss to provide comfort and practical support. The queen consort had become an unexpected source of strength, sharing her wisdom about facing public scrutiny during personal crises and helping Catherine think through how to eventually share the news with the nation. The royal family had closed ranks around William and Catherine, setting aside any previous tensions to focus on what truly mattered during this impossible time. As autumn approached, Catherine's condition had begun to show more noticeable effects. Her handwriting had become shaky, requiring her to dictate letters and notes instead of writing them herself. Occasional tremors in her hands made some daily activities challenging, though she maintained her independence as much as possible. Most heartbreakingly for William, her energy levels had decreased significantly, forcing them to carefully prioritize how she spent her limited strength each day. The decision about when and how to tell the children had been agonizing. Child psychologists had advised them to be honest in age-appropriate ways, emphasizing the love that would continue even after Catherine was gone. They planned to have this conversation soon, wanting the children to have time to process and ask questions while Catherine was still feeling relatively well. The thought of seeing confusion and pain in their children's eyes was almost unbearable, but both parents knew that honesty, delivered with love and support, was the kindest approach. Catherine had begun working on special projects for each child. For George, she was creating a detailed journal about royal history and the responsibilities he would one day inherit, mixed with personal stories and advice about leadership and service. For Charlotte, she was compiling a collection of their favorite recipes along with stories about the strong women in their family, hoping to inspire her daughter's confidence and independence. For Louis, she was creating a photo album filled with pictures of their adventures together, each one accompanied by a simple message of love that he could read when he was older. The couple had also made the difficult decision to plan a final public appearance together. They wanted to say goodbye to the British people who had supported them throughout their marriage and royal duties. The event would be carefully choreographed to celebrate their partnership and Catherine's contributions while beginning to prepare the nation for the transition ahead. Palace officials were working on the complex logistics of an appearance that would be both deeply personal and appropriately regal. William had found solace in long conversations with his grandmother's former private secretary, who helped him understand how the late Queen Elizabeth had handled personal grief while maintaining public duties. These discussions had given him a framework for thinking about how to honor Catherine's memory while continuing his own royal responsibilities and single parenthood. The weight of eventually ruling while grieving seemed overwhelming, but he was beginning to see how his love for Catherine could become a source of strength rather than just sorrow. Evening rituals had become especially precious to them. After the children were tucked into bed, William and Catherine would sit together in their private garden, talking about everything and nothing while holding hands and watching the stars. These quiet moments away from medical appointments and future planning allowed them to simply be husband and wife, remembering the love story that had brought them to this point and celebrating the beautiful life they had built together despite its heartbreaking brevity. The autumn leaves were beginning to turn golden when Catherine and William finally sat down with their children to share the news that would change their world forever. They had chosen the comfort of the family sitting room at Adelaide Cottage, where countless bedtime stories had been read and family games played. The familiar surroundings felt important, providing a sense of security during what they knew would be one of the most difficult conversations of their lives. George sat quietly on the sofa between his parents, while Charlotte curled up in her father's lap, and Louis played with his toy cars on the carpet nearby. William's voice was steady but gentle as he began to explain that Mummy was very sick with something that the doctors couldn't fix. He used simple words that Louis could understand while making sure George and Charlotte grasped the seriousness of the situation. Catherine held George's hand tightly as tears began to flow down his cheeks, her own composure remarkable as she focused entirely on comforting her children. The questions came slowly at first, then, in a rush as the reality began to sink in. Charlotte wanted to know if it hurt, if Mummy would have to go to the hospital, and why the doctors couldn't make her better like they had when she had broken her arm. Louis, understanding less but sensing the sadness around him, climbed into his mother's lap and declared that he would take care of her. George, always the responsible older brother, asked the hardest question of all: how much time did they have left together? Catherine answered each question with honesty tempered by hope, explaining that while she wouldn't get better, they would have wonderful times together in the months ahead. She promised that even when she couldn't be with them physically, her love would always be with them. The family spent the rest of that evening cuddled together, sharing favorite memories, and making plans for special activities they wanted to do together while Catherine still felt well enough. The days that followed brought a new rhythm to their household. The children became more attentive to their mother, Charlotte insisting on brushing Catherine's hair each morning, and Louis bringing her drawings and flowers from the garden. George began spending more time with his father, absorbing lessons about duty and responsibility while also learning how to support his younger siblings through their grief. The family had become more intentional about everything, from bedtime stories to weekend adventures. Dr. Harrison's regular visits had become part of their routine, monitoring Catherine's condition and adjusting treatments to maintain her comfort and mobility for as long as possible. The medical team had been carefully selected for their expertise not just in treating her condition, but in helping families navigate end-of-life care with dignity and grace. Physical therapy sessions helped Catherine maintain her strength and independence, while occupational therapists suggested modifications to daily activities that would become necessary as her condition progressed. Catherine's parents had become constant fixtures in their lives, providing practical support and emotional stability for the entire family. Carol had taken over much of the household management, ensuring that meals appeared regularly and that normal routines continued for the children. Michael had become George's special confidant, taking long walks with his grandson and listening to his fears and questions about the future. Their presence allowed William to focus entirely on supporting his wife and children without worrying about the daily logistics of running a household during such a difficult time. The decision to gradually share the news with their closest friends and extended family had been carefully planned. Each conversation was deeply personal, with Catherine and William choosing their words thoughtfully to help their loved ones understand the situation while also asking for specific types of support. Some friends were asked to continue treating Catherine normally, maintaining the friendships and activities that brought her joy. Others were asked to help with practical matters or to be available for the children when the time came. Catherine's brother James had surprised everyone by suggesting they create a family podcast, recording conversations and stories that the children could listen to whenever they missed their mother's voice. The idea had resonated immediately, and they had begun having weekly recording sessions where Catherine shared childhood memories, family traditions, and philosophical thoughts about life and love. William often joined these sessions, and their natural banter and deep affection for each other created beautiful keepsakes that captured their relationship at its best. The media had begun to notice Catherine's reduced public appearances, though the palace's careful management of information had prevented speculation from becoming too intrusive. Official statements continued to cite her need for rest and time with family, which was technically true even if incomplete. The couple knew they would eventually need to share the full truth with the public, but they wanted to control the timing and manner of that revelation to protect their children's privacy during this vulnerable time. Planning Catherine's eventual public farewell had become a delicate balance between honoring her wishes and meeting the nation's need to say goodbye to a beloved member of the royal family. She wanted the event to be a celebration rather than a funeral, focusing on hope, love, and the causes she cared about rather than dwelling on sadness. Working with palace event coordinators, they had begun designing a ceremony that would reflect Catherine's personality and values while providing closure for the millions of people who had followed her royal journey. The couple had also begun making decisions about more personal matters, such as how to preserve Catherine's memory in their home and what traditions she wanted to continue through the children. Catherine's love of photography had inspired plans for a special exhibition of her work, with proceeds supporting the mental health charities she championed. Her passion for gardening led to discussions about creating a memorial garden where the children could go to feel close to their mother. Every decision reflected their desire to ensure that Catherine's influence would continue shaping their family long after she was gone. As winter approached, Catherine's stamina continued to decline, making it necessary to use a wheelchair for longer outings and to accept more help with daily activities. Rather than seeing these changes as defeats, she approached them as adaptations that would allow her to continue participating in family life. The children adjusted remarkably well to these modifications, with Louis proudly pushing his mother's wheelchair and Charlotte taking charge of carrying things Catherine could no longer manage easily. The family had established new traditions that accommodated Catherine's changing abilities while maximizing their time together. Saturday morning breakfasts became elaborate affairs where everyone helped prepare favorite dishes and lingered over the meal sharing stories and jokes. Sunday afternoon movie marathons allowed Catherine to rest comfortably while still enjoying family time. Evening walks around their garden gave them quiet moments to talk and enjoy each other's company without the energy demands of more ambitious outings. Catherine had begun recording bedtime stories for each of her children, creating an extensive library of tales told in her own voice. Some were classic fairy tales and beloved children's books, while others were made-up stories featuring the children themselves as heroes and heroines. She had also recorded lullabies and poems, knowing that her voice singing their favorite songs would comfort them during difficult nights after she was gone. These recording sessions often moved William to tears, watching his wife pour her love into gifts that would outlast her physical presence. The couple's own relationship had deepened during this time in ways they had never expected. Stripped of pretense and focused entirely on what truly mattered, they had found new levels of intimacy and understanding. Their conversations had become more philosophical, exploring questions about love, legacy, and the meaning of their time together. They spent hours reminiscing about their courtship, their wedding, and the early days of parenthood, celebrating the beautiful journey they had shared even as they faced its approaching end. William had begun keeping a detailed journal, documenting not just the practical aspects of Catherine's care, but also his observations about her courage, their children's resilience, and the profound lessons he was learning about love and loss. These writings would become precious reminders of this difficult time, but also celebrations of the extraordinary grace with which his family was facing an impossible situation. The journal had become his way of processing emotions too complex for conversation, while also creating a record of Catherine's final months that he could share with their children when they were older. Friends and family members had begun organizing their own ways to honor Catherine's memory and support the family. A group of her university friends had established a scholarship fund for students studying early childhood development. Her charitable patronages had quietly begun planning ways to continue her work and celebrate her contributions. The outpouring of love and support had been overwhelming, reminding Catherine and William daily of the positive impact she had made on so many lives throughout her time as a working royal. The decision to share Catherine's diagnosis with the public came sooner than they had hoped, forced by increasing media speculation about her extended absence from royal duties. The palace communications team had worked tirelessly to craft a statement that would be honest yet hopeful, dignified yet personal. Catherine had insisted on recording a video message herself, wanting the nation to hear directly from her rather than through official statements or palace spokespeople. The recording took place in the garden at Adelaide Cottage on a crisp February morning when Catherine was having one of her better days. Dressed simply in a favorite blue sweater that brought out her eyes, she sat on a wooden bench surrounded by the winter roses she had planted years earlier. Her voice was steady and warm as she explained her condition to the camera, thanking the medical team for their care and the public for their continued support of her family. The response to her announcement was immediate and overwhelming. Social media flooded with messages of love and support from around the world, while news outlets struggled to balance their coverage between respect for the family's privacy and the public's desire for information. The palace was inundated with flowers, cards, and gifts from well-wishers, creating a logistical challenge that was also deeply moving for Catherine and William to witness. King Charles issued his own statement expressing the family's complete support for William and Catherine during this difficult time, while also asking for privacy and space for them to navigate their journey with dignity. The Archbishop of Canterbury offered prayers and support, and leaders from around the world sent personal messages expressing their admiration for Catherine's courage and their sympathy for the family's situation. The children had been prepared for the public attention that would follow their mother's announcement, but the reality was still overwhelming. Extra security measures were put in place at their school, and palace staff worked to shield them from media attention while still allowing them to maintain normal routines. George showed remarkable maturity in how he handled questions from classmates, while Charlotte and Louis were young enough that much of the external attention went unnoticed by them. Catherine's medical team had warned that the public announcement might bring stress that could accelerate her decline, but instead she seemed energized by the opportunity to be honest about her situation. The burden of maintaining a facade of wellness had been exhausting, and the relief of openness allowed her to focus entirely on her family and the time they had left together. She began accepting selected visits from friends and family members who wanted to say their personal goodbyes, creating opportunities for meaningful conversations and closure. The planning for Catherine's public farewell ceremony had intensified following her announcement, with palace officials working closely with the family to create an event that would honor her life and legacy while providing the nation with an opportunity to express their grief and gratitude. The ceremony would take place at Westminster Abbey, where she and William had been married 14 years earlier, creating a poetic symmetry that felt appropriately meaningful for such a significant moment. Catherine had specific requests for her farewell ceremony. She wanted music that celebrated life rather than mourning death, including pieces that had been meaningful during her courtship with William and their wedding. She requested that children from the schools and charities she supported be given prominent roles in the ceremony, reflecting her belief that young people represented hope for the future. Most importantly, she wanted the event to raise awareness and funds for the medical research that might prevent other families from facing similar situations. The guest list for the ceremony reflected the breadth of Catherine's impact during her years as a working royal. Representatives from every organization she had supported would attend, along with heads of state, fellow royals from around the world, and personal friends who had shared her journey. The challenge was balancing the formal requirements of a state occasion with the personal touches that would make the event meaningful for Catherine and her family. Catherine had begun spending individual time with each of her children, creating special memories and sharing specific advice tailored to each of their personalities. With George, she talked about leadership and service, helping him understand the responsibilities he would inherit while also encouraging him to maintain his own interests and friendships. She emphasized that being royal was about serving others, not being served by them, and that true leadership came from kindness and empathy rather than authority. Her conversations with Charlotte focused on confidence and independence, encouraging her daughter to pursue her interests fearlessly and to never let anyone diminish her voice or her dreams. Catherine shared stories about the strong women in their family, from Queen Elizabeth II to her own mother, emphasizing how each had found ways to make a positive impact while staying true to themselves. She wanted Charlotte to understand that being a princess was just one part of who she was, not the definition of her entire identity. With Louis, Catherine focused on simpler concepts appropriate for his age, emphasizing how much she loved him and how proud she was of his kindness to others. She created photo albums showing their adventures together and recorded herself reading his favorite stories, knowing that these concrete reminders of her love would be important as he grew older and his memories of their time together naturally faded. She wanted him to always know that his mother had adored everything about him. William had taken on increasing responsibility for managing both the practical aspects of Catherine's care and the emotional needs of their children. He had learned to recognize the signs of her good and bad days, adjusting family activities accordingly while maintaining as much normalcy as possible. His own grief was complicated by the need to remain strong for everyone else, though Catherine had insisted on regular counseling sessions to help him process his emotions and prepare for single parenthood. The couple had worked together to create detailed plans for the children's future, including their education, living arrangements, and continued relationships with Catherine's family. They had discussed how to maintain connections to Catherine's memory through annual traditions, special occasions, and regular visits to places that had been meaningful to their family. Every decision reflected their shared commitment to ensuring that Catherine's influence would continue shaping their children's lives long after she was gone. Catherine's relationship with her medical team had evolved into something resembling friendship, as they worked together to maintain her quality of life while preparing for the inevitable progression of her condition. Dr. Harrison had become a trusted advisor not just about medical matters, but about how to talk with the children about death and dying. The nursing staff had become extended family members, providing not just professional care, but emotional support for the entire household. The media attention had settled into a respectful pattern after the initial frenzy following Catherine's announcement. Most outlets had agreed to guidelines about coverage that respected the family's privacy while acknowledging the public's interest in Catherine's condition and the plans for her farewell ceremony. The palace had established regular updates about her condition to prevent speculation while maintaining appropriate boundaries about private family matters. Catherine had surprised everyone by requesting to visit several of her charitable patronages one final time, wanting to thank the staff and volunteers personally for their dedication to causes she cared about. These visits were carefully planned to accommodate her physical limitations while maximizing her ability to connect with people who had been important partners in her royal work. The conversations during these visits were deeply meaningful, as Catherine shared her hopes for the future of each organization and expressed gratitude for the privilege of working alongside such dedicated people. The winter months had brought both challenges and unexpected joys. Catherine's mobility had continued to decline, requiring more assistance with daily activities, but her spirits remained remarkably positive. She had developed a new appreciation for simple pleasures like watching snow fall from her bedroom window, enjoying afternoon tea with family, and listening to William read aloud in the evenings. These quiet moments had become treasures, reminding everyone that happiness didn't require grand gestures or perfect health. As spring approached, and the date for Catherine's farewell ceremony drew nearer, the family had begun experiencing anticipatory grief alongside their continuing hope for as much time as possible together. The knowledge that they were living through their last months as a complete family cast everything in sharp relief, making ordinary moments feel extraordinary while also creating an undercurrent of sadness that was impossible to ignore completely. The morning of Catherine's farewell ceremony dawned clear and bright, with spring sunshine streaming through the windows of Adelaide Cottage as if nature itself wanted to honor her final public appearance. Catherine had slept peacefully, waking refreshed and determined to make this day a celebration of love and hope rather than a moment of mourning. Her medical team had worked carefully to ensure she would have the energy needed for the ceremony, adjusting her medications to maximize her comfort and alertness during this crucial day. William helped Catherine dress in the elegant navy blue dress she had chosen for the occasion, the same designer who had created her wedding gown 14 years earlier. The dress had been specially modified to accommodate her wheelchair while maintaining the grace and dignity that had always characterized Catherine's public appearances. Her jewelry was simple but meaningful, her engagement ring, wedding band, and a pearl necklace that had belonged to Diana, creating connections across generations of royal women who had faced their own challenges with courage. The children were dressed in their finest clothes, with George wearing a suit similar to his father's, and the younger ones in coordinated outfits that Catherine had helped select weeks earlier. Despite the solemnity of the occasion, there was excitement in the household as the family prepared for what they all understood was a historic moment. Catherine had spent the previous evening reassuring the children about what to expect, emphasizing that this day was about celebrating their family and the love that connected them to people around the world. The journey to Westminster Abbey was carefully choreographed to allow Catherine to wave to the crowds that had gathered along the route, while minimizing her physical exertion. The modified royal car accommodated her wheelchair, while maintaining the dignity expected for such an important occasion. The children sat quietly beside their parents, occasionally pointing out signs, and flowers being held by well-wishers who had traveled from across the United Kingdom and beyond to show their support. The Abbey was filled with 2,000 guests representing every aspect of Catherine's life and work. Her university friends sat near representatives from the charities she had supported, while world leaders shared pews with teachers from the children's schools and staff members from the various royal households. The diversity of the gathering reflected the breadth of Catherine's impact and the genuine affection she had earned through years of dedicated service and authentic engagement with people from all walks of life. Catherine's arrival at the Abbey was met with spontaneous applause that grew into a sustained ovation lasting several minutes. The congregation rose to their feet as she was wheeled down the aisle, her face radiant with gratitude as she acknowledged friends and supporters throughout the vast space. William walked beside her wheelchair, occasionally squeezing her hand as they made their way to the specially prepared area near the altar where the ceremony would take place. The Archbishop of Canterbury led the service with words that celebrated Catherine's life while acknowledging the grief shared by everyone present. Rather than focusing on her illness, the ceremony highlighted her contributions to society, her devotion to family, and her embodiment of service and dedication that defined the best of royal tradition. Children from schools Catherine had supported sang hymns, their young voices filling the ancient space with hope and beauty that moved many in the congregation to tears. William delivered a tribute to his wife that was both deeply personal and appropriately public, sharing stories that illustrated Catherine's character while thanking the nation for embracing her as one of their own. His voice remained steady throughout, though those who knew him well could see the tremendous effort required to maintain his composure during such an emotional moment. He spoke about Catherine's legacy of kindness, her commitment to helping others, and her unwavering dedication to their family despite facing unimaginable challenges. Catherine herself addressed the congregation briefly, her voice clear and strong as she thanked everyone for their love and support throughout her royal journey. She spoke about the privilege of serving alongside William and the honor of representing the British people around the world. Most movingly, she expressed gratitude for the opportunity to be a mother and her hope that the values she had tried to instill in her children would continue to make a positive difference in the world long after she was gone. The musical selections for the ceremony had been carefully chosen to reflect both celebration and farewell. The same choir that had sung at Catherine and William's wedding performed pieces that had special meaning for the couple, while a children's orchestra played compositions that Catherine had enjoyed during her charity work. The combination of familiar hymns and contemporary pieces created an atmosphere that honored tradition while embracing the modernity that Catherine had brought to her royal role. Representatives from Catherine's charitable patronages spoke briefly about her impact on their organizations and the communities they served. A researcher from the Mental Health Foundation Catherine had championed announced a major breakthrough in treatment that had been partially funded by her advocacy efforts. The head of an early childhood development program shared statistics showing improved outcomes for thousands of children who had benefited from initiatives Catherine had launched. These concrete examples of her legacy provided comfort to everyone present, demonstrating that her work would continue making a difference long into the future. The ceremony concluded with a blessing that emphasized hope and continuity rather than finality. As the congregation sang the final hymn, many were crying openly while also feeling uplifted by the celebration of a life well lived and the promise that Catherine's influence would endure through her family and the causes she had supported. The combination of sadness and joy reflected the complex emotions everyone felt about saying goodbye to someone who had touched so many lives in positive ways. Following the Abbey service, a smaller gathering of close family and friends returned to Windsor Castle for a private reception. This more intimate setting allowed for personal conversations and shared memories among people who had known Catherine in different contexts throughout her life. The reception featured displays of Catherine's photography work, videos of her involvement with various charities, and a memorial garden where guests could plant flowers in her honor. The children handled the day with remarkable poise, clearly understanding the importance of the occasion while still maintaining the natural behavior appropriate for their ages. George stood close to his father throughout the day, offering quiet support while observing how William managed his public duties during personal grief. Charlotte charmed guests with her natural confidence and warmth, displaying many of her mother's characteristics in her interactions with others. Louis provided moments of lightness and joy that reminded everyone that life continues even during difficult times. The global response to Catherine's farewell ceremony was immediate and overwhelming. Messages of support and admiration came from leaders, celebrities, and ordinary people around the world who had been moved by her courage and grace. Social media was filled with photos and memories from people who had met Catherine during royal visits or charity events, creating a virtual celebration of her life that extended far beyond the physical gathering at Westminster Abbey. In the weeks following the ceremony, Catherine experienced a period of relative stability that allowed for precious family time and quiet reflection on the day's events. She had accomplished her goal of saying goodbye to the public on her own terms, with dignity and celebration rather than through illness and decline. The success of the ceremony had given her peace about her legacy and confidence that her family would be surrounded by love and support in the difficult times ahead. William had been profoundly moved by the public response to Catherine's ceremony, finding strength in the recognition of his wife's contributions and the outpouring of support for their family. The event had marked the beginning of his transition to royal duties as a widower and single father, responsibilities he would face with the knowledge that Catherine's memory would continue inspiring him and their children. The children's understanding of their mother's condition had deepened through witnessing the ceremony and the public's response to her life. They had seen firsthand how much their mother meant to people around the world, giving them pride in her legacy and confidence in their own ability to carry forward her values of service and compassion. As spring turned to summer, Catherine's health began the gradual decline that everyone had been preparing for. But the success of her public farewell had given the entire family a foundation of peace and closure that would sustain them through the challenging months ahead. The ceremony had been both an ending and a beginning, marking the completion of Catherine's public life while celebrating the continuing influence of her love, wisdom, and dedication to making the world a better place for future generations.